Hi, maybe you've heard the term insulin resistant, prediabetes, syndrome X, any of those number of terms that mean the same thing. Basically, it means that you're metabolically not as healthy as you could be. And the reason that that matters is because a healthy metabolism is the key to a healthy weight. And so there are a lot of people that are running around and they can't lose weight. They might even be doing all of the right things and not having success. So let's talk about that a little bit and how you would know that and what you do about it if that is what you find out is happening to you. So no matter what you call this, whether it's prediabetes, insulin resistance, syndrome X, whatever, it's a state where your pancreas is essentially becoming worn out because the demand for insulin is so continuous and so high that your pancreas is pumping out insulin, a hormone, and it just gets kind of tired of doing it. And so why does that matter? What does that have to do with weight loss? It is, in my opinion, one of the major reasons that people struggle with weight loss, and it's a really big deal. And so the reason that it's a big deal is because insulin is the quote-unquote fat storage hormone. So high levels of insulin tell your body to store fat. And so what is happening is that your body, it can't get glucose, when insulin is high, it can't get glucose into the cells where it's needed and can be used. So it just floats around in your bloodstream. And you can see a pattern on blood tests if you're looking for the right things that would indicate that this is happening to you. And these are things that whenever someone comes to me and we have this conversation and they say, I'm really struggling to lose weight, along with asking questions about the thyroid and testing that if I think it's appropriate, this is the other thing that I look at is this blood sugar handling pattern. What is your body telling you about blood sugar handling? And you want certain things to be in certain ranges. So let's talk about that, because if these values are out of range, it basically means you have an issue with your metabolism. And we all know that a healthy metabolism is the way that you maintain a healthy weight. So let's talk about the markers that I look at on a blood test. Some of these you've probably heard about. Maybe some you are not familiar with. The first is a fasting glucose. That is a super simple number. It's on a metabolic panel, and it's the reason that you're fasted when you have labs. You can also do this with a little finger stick. You just buy a meter at home and keep it at home. I have people doing that, where in the morning when you wake up, before you eat something, you test that and see what it's called, a first morning glucose or fasted glucose. And it's really just one snapshot in time of how much glucose is floating around in your bloodstream right now. Now, the reference ranges that most labs will use is 65 to around 100 as quote-unquote normal. Well, that might be normal, but it's not an ideal number. I like to see that first morning glucose under 90 and ideally right around 85 or less. So that's a healthy, metabolically flexible person. So just because if you're at 99 and it still flags as normal in your lab test, I don't think that's a great thing. But it's also only one number representing one snapshot in time. So then we move on and we look at something called a hemoglobin A1C. And that is basically the average glucose over a 3-month period. They take a red blood cell, they look at what the average glucose was over a 3-month period, and you get this number. On mine too, it'll say hemoglobin A1C equals, say it's 5.0 is the number. It'll also say estimated average glucose is 100. An A1C of 5 is equivalent to about 100 average glucose. So that means that just any average time your blood sugar is averaging about 100. That's actually a really healthy hemoglobin A1C number. You want that to be between about 4.8 and 5.2 ideally. Now, once you start creeping up 5.6, 5.7 to 6.2 in that range, that's what's considered a pre-diabetic indication range. So we can look at this and just get a glimpse of, over the last 3 months, how high were your blood sugar levels on average. And I think this is really important. A lot of doctors will not do this unless a glucose number comes back above 100 or above 110 or whatever they determine is the criteria to start looking into that. So I think we have a lot of people running around that have metabolic problems that are just being completely ignored because they're not yet diabetic or really close to being diabetic. But I believe that if we do the homework now, we can save ourselves from really big problems later and get a handle on why the weight loss is so hard. So that's another thing that I like to look at, is this hemoglobin A1C number. And I like to tell people that you want to keep it under 5.2. That's the functional level, in my opinion. So, and then the last one, the third marker that I like to look at, is something called a fasting insulin. It's a little different than a fasting glucose. It's a measure of insulin and how much demand is your body having for your pancreas to secrete insulin. So again, we talked about insulin as a fat storage hormone. If that is always elevated, the message to your body is always store fat, store fat. So when we see this fasting insulin level high, we know this person is in fat storage mode, and until we get a handle on that, it's really hard to lose weight, especially in the form of fat. So what's a normal level on that? I like to see it under 5 for sure, and more ideally even around 4. Now, I will tell you that I don't see this very often. I run a lot of these tests, and they're normally much, much higher than this. And what I do with this number, this fasting insulin, is there is a formula that I use, and you plug in someone's fasting glucose and their insulin number, and there's something called a HOMA Insulin Resistance score, so or a HOMA IR score, and there's scientific research done about this, and I have a link to that. If you read my blog post at drjeni.com, drjeni.com, there's an article, a blog post article on this, and it has the reference to this and explains how that calculated metric came about and what it means and all that kind of stuff. But basically, it's a measure of how insulin resistant you are, and you want your score, when you plug in all the right numbers, you want your score to be 1 or less. That indicates that you're sensitive to insulin, which is ideal. Now, the more insulin resistant you become, the higher that number gets. So 1.9 is mildly insulin resistant, 2.9 is severely insulin resistant. So I will tell you, when I calculate this on most of my clients, most of them are above 5. That means they're severely insulin resistant. So that is a root cause for them of many health problems, and so we work on all of the things that we do to try to turn that tide and reverse that. So what are the things that you can do to become metabolically more flexible and less insulin resistant? You basically have to train your body to be more efficient at utilizing glucose. So that is done with a lower carbohydrate diet. Usually that is a higher fat, lower carbohydrate diet. The protein, you can't play around with too much because you can only absorb, and your kidneys can only handle so much protein. So for me, I always recommend staying around that 25% protein, 25% of your daily calories coming from protein, and then 25% or less coming from carbs, and 50% from fat. I think that's a really healthy diet that offers the benefits of low carb, but allows for enough carbs for you to get things that have fiber and are healthy for your digestion and your gut microbiome. Things like beets and sweet potatoes and beans and lentils, worked in, not huge amounts of them, but worked in rotation with your diet, so that you get all the benefits of eating lower carbohydrate with the benefits of having some of those healthy fiber foods. Move your body, and it doesn't take hours a day. We're talking about 30 minutes a day, and the most effective type of exercise for metabolic flexible flexibility is high intensity, like interval type stuff. So you really just get that heart rate up, whether it's lifting weights or sprinting or, jumping rope or something where you've got these intervals, things like that. That's most days of the week. Like when I say most days, 4 or 5 times a week, you need to be doing this kind of stuff. And then the third thing that I think is important is get this information on your body. If you're watching this and you're sitting there wondering, like, is this a issue for me? I think the advice that I just gave you about the way that you eat and the way that you move your body is good for everybody. But I also think there's a lot of value in having that analysis done on yourself with your blood sugar handling, and depends on what else is going on with you, what other labs might be part of that package, but collecting the information on yourself so that you know what about you needs to change and be different for you to be as healthy as you can be. So for what that's worth, those are my those are my tips. I hope that this provided a lot of value for you. If you have questions about that or want to reach out to my team, get in touch with us. You can visit drjeni.com, drjeni.com. You can schedule a time to chat with us if you're interested in having some of that analysis run, or you just want to talk about a health concern you have. Have a great day, and thanks for listening.